It was actually early in the morning. I was in line to make a speed run. They don't get that way by themselves, and that's actually a pertinent question. In that, what I'm interested in is the way in which these are really trivializes they're really unique, but they do, to a degree, have a form follows function quality. But they're also aesthetically and operationally just real oddball things. On one hand, they're theoretically built for speed, and it's a place where you simply get in your car and go as fast as you possibly can. But there's a lot of other stuff there that it's a car from the early 1950s that has been transformed actually kind of awkwardly into one of these cars. And there are things that people that are interested in the sport and are knowledgeable on a technical level about automobiles would notice that just don't make a lot of rational sense. For somebody walking in that doesn't know much about this activity or the kind of sport that goes with this, they would just see an old and an odd-looking car, and I think that's interesting. But the more you know about the subject, I think potentially the more interesting the piece is. I think that's what photographers do. I don't care what you photograph, that's what photographers do. They photograph things that they have some knowledge of, or that they have undergone some kind of exploration or investigation of, and then they show you what they've found. And there was a famous curator one time that said that the act of making a photograph is like the act of pointing. You point to something that you think is interesting, and the act of making the photograph is saying, I would like you to think that this is interesting as well. So I am pointing to these, there's an infinite number of interesting things that happen, and I very selectively take aspects of that and make photographic images of it that are hopefully about the object and also about the event.
These are all fabricated just out of copper sheet. So it starts as just big flat pieces of copper, and there's a few elements that are actually forged wire, but the majority of it is copper sheet. I actually teach the metalsmithing and jewelry areas. Most of my work is either sterling silver, copper, like mostly non-ferrous metal. I don't want to sound too personal, but this work actually was pretty important to me on a personal level, because I just had our child and was trying really hard to rebalance my life so I can get back in the studio and be figuring out a way to include my studio practice with this new responsibility of raising a child. I worry that they're a little too overtly autobiographical in that way, but they are. So they're all, the title of the series is called Polulate, which refers to germination or reproduction, things like that, which was something that clearly I was thinking about. And so each one of these kind of functions as a response to that. So like the piece in the middle, the smaller vessel is literally connected to the larger vessel. And when you fill the larger vessel with a liquid, it goes down to the smaller one and actually just keeps going out, like drain until it gets down. And it sounds kind of negative, and I don't mean for it to. But that's really how you feel sometimes after having a child. It's like you've just got a finite amount of energy to give, and the child takes so much of it. And of course you want that, and you want to give it to that child. But there's also something where you just hit a wall at some point and think, I've got to get back to finding myself again. And I think that's kind of what this work represents. And it was also the first kind of cohesive body, like new body of work that I was able to make after my daughter was born. But yeah, it was after she had just turned 2, and it was my first summer where I could really invest myself back in the studio. So each of these is sort of a variation on it.